Hello, boys and girls. It's lovely to see you all. I'm sorry that I wasn't here when I was supposed to be here. I was in an interesting taxi who decided that linear was better and that the Cure Traffic was an entertaining public art project that I should have a full experience of because it was much more exciting than being with all of you here with a beer. So in that taxi, I wrote two things. I wrote, "This is not my beautiful net," and I wrote something I can't read. Yes, "If there is hope," and I'm going to get to "If there is hope." And then when I arrived here, I bumped into Richard Barbrook. Stand up, Richard. And this man has an important part in the story I'm about to tell, which takes you from the days in 1984 when, fresh-faced and bored, after a year working for an organisation called the Department for Health and Social Security, older people may go, administering supplementary benefit, older people may go, I decided that life as a junior civil servant sucked because I had a degree from Cambridge University and I was only doing it because my partner at the time was doing a PhD, and she suggested I do something called the Diploma in Computer Science, which I then did at Cambridge University, because this was back in the days when younger people can go, you could get paid for being educated. Yeah. Well, who would have thought? Who would have thought that actually investing in people's skills and abilities could contribute to society? I know it's a mad idea. Not even the liberals think that these days. So I did the Diploma in Computer Science, which was fabulous, and it was at Cambridge University, which was also fabulous, and it was the world's oldest taught qualification in computing. It had been founded in 1954, when there were 3 computers, and one of them was in Cambridge. So I was taught by some interesting people, like the man who created the language BCPL, Martin Richards, like the man who invented the subroutine. Okay, so it was a really great time. And we had an IBM 360 computer that ran our own operating system called Phoenix, because Cambridge was too posh to run IBM's own operating system. We had to write one of our own. And I had a lecturer who used to dream of the day when a processor would have a whole megabyte of RAM, all to himself. And we had access to this thing called the internet, which I discovered later was about 6 or 7 months old at the time. And the internet was great because there were all these cat videos. Oh no, sorry, that's to come. The internet was great because you could send email to people who were outside Cambridge, and you could look at you could transfer files around, and it was really helpful and phenomenally boring. It was just there. There was nothing exciting about being on the internet. The internet was just this thing. And it was a set of protocols. I later discovered that Vint Cerf and Bob Kahn had knocked them up on the back of a napkin some years earlier, and it had come from the ARPANET, and I learned all the glorious history of this great network, but at the time it was just, my computer can do stuff with your computer, and isn't that how it's supposed to be? So I've never been particularly surprised or interested in the network as a network because I was introduced to it too young. As a result, unlike many of us, I think I missed what was going on. Because 1984, the year I first used the internet, was the year William Gibson wrote Neuromancer and the term cyberspace went into popular usage. It was also, of course, the year famously described by George Orwell in his book 1984. And those of you who follow me on Twitter will notice that I waste characters writing out the words 1980-4 because that's what Orwell fucking well wrote, and anybody who shortens it to 1984 is dead to me. But 1984 was, of course, 1948 re-represented as a dystopia. Not a manual, although, as we've seen in the last 40 years, many people have interpreted it as such. So 1984 was an interesting year for me, and if I look back at the past, I can see that I didn't understand it at the time. This is an old Soviet proverb. It was particularly true after the collapse of the Soviet Union, when the archives were opened up and people discovered all the things they knew about the past were untrue. It's also, of course, true of us today, as you'll see as I carry on talking. So 1984 was a good and interesting year, and I learned a lot, and I learned how to use the network, and I went on to use that network in many ways, to the point where in the early 90s I ended up working for a company called Pipette, the public IP exchange, set up by a guy called Peter Dorr. Those who remember Peter will remember Peter. And found myself at the curve, just at the starting point of this explosion in public internet access. At that point, I met this dazzling, beautiful blonde woman. She's sitting there in the front. And I'm sure she has forgiven me for the day I walked into Siberia with one of Pipex's very expensive lawyers and took her router away. Because you hadn't paid the bill. This I later discovered was part of David's business strategy, because the next day you were online with BT, having already arranged for the day we would turn up to take it away, and therefore never having had to pay that bill. A shrewd businesswoman right from the start. And I got involved with a whole load of people who thought the internet was really cool and sexy and fantastic, and we built this amazing world. I went to CERN in 1994 to the first web conference and hung out with Tim Berners-Lee. You might have heard of him. The name's reasonably popular. And Brian Behlendorf and all sorts of people. And we had this brilliant time. I got involved with The Guardian and Wired magazine. And around this time, in 1994, 20 years ago, I built something called the Fringe Web for the Edinburgh Fringe, and I put Guardian content on it, and we took a whole load of computers up to Edinburgh and put them up in the where was it? The Pleasance. We put them up in the Pleasance so people could access it. And a stand-up comic called Danny O'Brien did a show called Caught in the Net, and we made a move for it, and we had a digital... It was fantastic. It really was. It was like being in San Francisco in the 60s, but with less acid. Well, at least for me, I can't speak for the rest of you. And we knew that we had made something wonderful. We knew we had made something that was absolutely fantastic. It was this point where you realise that things are now different, because people can have access to information, yeah, but they also have a reason to use the internet. The reason Pipex was interested in the web was because Peter Dorr had noticed that people who paid his extremely reasonable £1,000 a month for a 64k leased line, extremely reasonable, honest, wondered what the hell it was for. Because they could send and exchange emails, they could do file transfer, they could move documents around, a bit like I could do back in 1984, and little else. And when the web arrived, we realised this was the exciting thing. This was the thing that ordinary people who knew fuck all about computers would get excited about, and they'd give us lots of money. We were motivated by many other factors, but for Pipex, that was the key thing. And so I was asked to become the company's internet ambassador, and my job description was do cool stuff. Which is, and I recommend it to all of you, the best job description you can ever ask for. If anybody says, write your job description, you just say, do cool stuff, hand it in, and if they don't fire you, you win. Okay? Most of you will get fired, but hey, that's a small price to pay for taking the risk. I thoroughly recommend it. Send them to me if you have any questions. And so we were doing this, and Eva and those of you who were around at the time will testify, it was a really exciting point. You know, when Siberia opened, it was like this portal to a new world opened. It was like that scene in Ghostbusters where Sigourney Weaver opens the fridge and it goes, zoom! Yeah, but nice. Obviously, if you like demons, Zool was pretty nice and turned out to be Janine. Oh, sorry, I hope I gave the plot away. But apart from that, it was really fun. And we were so optimistic, we failed to notice the worm in the bud. We failed to notice that the systems we were building on lacked all the features that you might want if you're going to build a humane society on top of them. We failed to notice that we had completely ignored the possibility that nasty people might arrive in our nice shiny network and do bad things with it, because we were so busy having fun over here, building really cool websites and databases and CGI scripts. So interesting that the bash bug is 22 years old. Therefore, people were probably exploiting that against my CGI scripts back in 94, and I never knew. So we were just having a great time. We were building a new world, a shiny new world. And like the hippies in San Francisco, that world was parasitic. You could only be a hippie in San Francisco really successfully if you ignored the fact that the structures of society, civil society, the rule of law, the banking system, the checks from your parents, the complex chemical manufacturing processes that made the drugs you were ingesting, all relied on modern industrial society. But as long as you put that to one side, you could have a fantastic time. But when modern industrial society came calling, things went horribly wrong. when modern industrial society came calling for the internet, we were not ready. In fact, we were so not ready, we were completely overwhelmed by it. In 2002, Richard Barbrook, in an act of what he will acknowledge was insanity, asked me to give the Christmas lecture at the ICA for CyberSalon. Because he had heard my stuff and he liked me and he respected and admired me. The rest of you will get to do that later.
You sold out as well.
And I'd sold out, yeah, or whatever.
Yeah, you sold out the tickets.
Oh, I sold out, sorry. Interesting mishearing there.
Freudian perspective.
What do you mean, my mother? He invited me to give the NMK Christmas lecture, which I was very happy to do, about is big business destroying the net? And it was a good lecture, but the ICA didn't know who I was and used it, shall we say, to terminate their relationship with CyberSalon, because although we filled the place and we had a fantastic time, they weren't happy with what I said. And of course, my opening line, which I found the talk, because everything's somewhere, was, of course, big business is destroying the net. Duh, what do you expect, suckers? And that's what it's there for. Now, this was in 2002, which was an interesting time because it was just after the dot-com crash. You may recall it. Anyone here who ever worked for Boo? Okay. No, oh, they're still crying. Poor James Cronin, the man who turned off the servers. Dear, sweet boy, I love him. So, in 2002, we had this interesting situation where vast amounts of what I call stupid money had been invested in internet infrastructure, and then all these companies had gone bust, and they'd left lots of servers and lots of fibre and lots of stuff around. And the growth in I use that term wisely, likely our use of the network from 2002 is because there was a lot of spare stuff around, because it had been paid for by idiot venture capitalists who'd invested in companies like Toys.com, whose business plan required them to have 115% of the entire North American toy market to make a profit, and yet still got funded. They'd invested in companies like that, which were clearly just going to tank, and they'd left behind the bits and pieces, the infrastructure. We were like animals moving into an abandoned city. And it was great because all these places to nest. It's fantastic. And there's all these spaces you can, and the creepers are growing up the walls, and we're living in the trees, throwing fruit at the few remaining savage humans and having a great time. And unfortunately, we didn't look, we didn't think. So in my talk at the time, I tried to point out that we were vulnerable, we were exposed, that the network we had built could be colonized really easily, that the humans might come back, and when they came back, they'd have machetes and guns, and we only had coconuts. And we were in trouble, even though we were really attractive monkeys with fantastically coloured bottoms. You've seen the internet. There were so many bottoms. As my son, who was then 15, said, I really like chat roulette. I reckon the ratio of 10 erect penises to 1 decent conversation is worth it. That's the world we built, people. This is the world we chose. This is what we wanted. We got our dream, okay? And it is a random California with a stiffy. So, facing that, in 2002, it was clear things were going to go wrong. And I put in my talk a proposal to build a hidden city. I said that one of the nice things about IP is it's a very forgiving protocol. And one of the great things about SSH, obviously apart from the fact that security is screwed, I didn't know that at the time, hadn't looked at the code base, there goes me. If I'd looked properly, I could have solved Heartbleed, but hey, no, I was too busy having a good time drinking beers with that man. The thing about the internet is you can build whatever you want on top of it. An IP is dumb and stupid. That's what's been built, and he built it really cleverly. And so we could have layered on top of it all sorts of layers. So I imagined something called a Linux file system, basically a blob that was a Linux binary that would run and it would only use tunneling SSH to talk to other versions of itself across the network. And it would do it in an obfuscated way, and it would be nicely hidden with all the chaff. And what it would essentially do would allow you to build on top of the public internet, which I saw and we thought at the time was ripe to be corrupted, something which we could control. And it was a nice idea, and we never did anything about it. Later, Corey in Big Brother, about 2008, wrote, what's the matter?
This computer might have died. Is it yours?
Oh, I don't care. Oh, sorry. No, I love your computer. I don't know. Sorry. And it even says Alienware. Oh, right. You see, in the end, the power will get you. You see, the people with power, they're the ones who matter. Big Brother, Corey wrote about paranoid Linux distros. And that was sort of a hint towards what I'd been talking about and what our conversations had revolved around. But we never did anything because we were too busy building a network that would support Facebook and Instagram and Snapchat and cat videos and chat roulette and all those other fun things because they were far more fun. And the real hard work of checking the code base for essential utilities and building systems that we could rely on and avoiding the access to the network by the agents of the state was for another day. We wanted to make money, we wanted to have good times, we wanted to go out and drink, we wanted to use the network. And so we used the network. And we woke up last year to discover we'd been living in Snowdonia for a good 5 or 6 years. That they had arrived, 20 years perhaps, that they had taken us, that they owned everything. We were pwned. That was it. The network belongs to other people who are extremely well-resourced. That gentleman who's leaving, for example, that agent of the NSA, who's had enough of being exposed by my fearless journalism. See you in a minute. To take all of our names.
Straight to Guantanamo with you.
If only. I've been to Cuba, it's lovely. The beaches are brilliant. Wrong bit. Not as much fun. No Cuba Libre. Oh, tragic. I went to Hemingway's place as well. Now there was a man who knew how to portray himself to the agents of the state. So, we woke up to find that in fact it was over. That we had lost. That we were comprehensively owned. That the systems that we thought we could trust, we can't trust. That as well as the vast number, the billions of dollars spent subverting the network, we have been so careless with our own security, shell shock, heartbeat, that we had actually left them with everything. We didn't care enough, and they took it. And they took it because then the people with the money can make more money, and the people who want to have power over us can assert that power. And they have that power. That's it. Yeah. It isn't going to happen. It isn't coming back. And that really depresses me. That really makes me think that we made a mistake. And my generation made the mistake. Yeah? So, in one sense, none of this matters, because the chances of the planet being remotely sympathetic towards human habitation in 50 years are so slim that you will all be suffering far more trying to find drinkable water and food than you will worrying over vulnerabilities in TCP/IP. So the fact we completely messed the ecosystem, and that any of you under the age of 30 is in real trouble because of what my generation 4 did, makes me feel slightly better about the fact that we messed the cyber system up as well. So we took William Gibson's beautiful dream of a corporately controlled network. If you actually read the book, what he imagined was roughly what we've got, with a few arch hackers and ICE and all that sort of nice stuff. But actually, he imagined far too vividly where our dream of cyberspace would go. We took his dream, we plucked from it the bits we liked, Molly with her sharp fingers, shiny eyes, Chase on his drugs with his cocktail, jacking into cyberspace. And like the adolescents we were, we tried to build the nice bits of the world without realizing that actually Neuromancer was a dystopia. You weren't supposed to emulate it. And just as in 1948, that wasn't a manual, that wasn't an idea about how to build society, Orwell was writing as a warning, Gibson, without realizing it, was writing us a warning, and we took the wrong message from his book. And that's where we find ourselves today. But as Orwell pointed out, thank you, there is hope. as long as 2 + 2 = 4, we can design new protocols. We can remake what has been made. And the potential exists, not quite to rip it up and start again, but maybe, as my friend Graham Linehan likes to say, try turning it off and turning it on again. And what Arrel and others are doing at the moment is just that. It's an attempt to say, we acknowledge the mistakes of the past, but we have learned something. We know how to compute, we know how to code, we know how to build open hardware, we know how to do these things. We have learned how to do that in a prison camp environment where our every move is observed. But our guards have made a real mistake because we have become educated in the process. And an educated and an aware prisoner is no longer a prisoner. Thank you.